The vSphere CPU scheduler works by scheduling multiple virtual CPUs to run on a set of shared processor cores. And the mechanism that was used in the past is something called strict co-scheduling. This is how our ESXi hosts used to work. They don't work this way anymore, but it's important to understand this as background as we get into some more advanced concepts. Okay, so let's take a look at how strict co-scheduling works. Here we have two virtual machines, the purple VM on the left and the gray VM on the right. The purple VM has 4 virtual CPUs assigned. And so when the purple VM wants to execute some task, it wants to push out some CPU instruction, it's going to utilize 4 processor cores. And that's what we see in this diagram. We've got a single socket quad-core CPU. So we've got 4 processor cores. And if my other virtual machine, the one that's equipped with 2 virtual CPUs, also has a task that it needs to schedule on that processor, it has to wait till the next time slot. Because the virtual machine with 4 virtual CPUs is dominating the resources of that processor during that one time slot. And what we end up with in this scenario is wasted CPU time slots, because the virtual machines can't run at the same time. The VM with 4 virtual CPUs, it can't execute something at the same time as the VM with 2 virtual CPUs, and vice versa. So I have these 2 virtual machines that end up taking turns with each other. And this results in something called CPU ready time. You may have heard this term CPU ready. What CPU ready means is it's the amount of time that a virtual machine is ready to execute some task, but cannot get access to a physical processor. So higher ready time values, that's bad. We don't want to see high ready time values. We want very, very low ready time values. And when you have virtual machines that are taking turns, you end up with higher ready values. So if I were to take that virtual machine that I've given 4 virtual CPUs and instead only give it 2, now both of these VMs would be able to execute at the same time with no taking turns and no waiting for each other to finish the work that they need to do. So it's actually possible that I can improve the performance of a VM by reducing the number of CPUs allocated to it. And I have a rule of thumb that I usually go by in these sorts of situations. The best practice is to give a virtual machine the resources that it needs. If I have a VM that needs 4 virtual CPUs, then I'll give it 4 virtual CPUs. But if I've got a VM with 4 virtual CPUs that's consistently running at 25% CPU utilization, that VM doesn't need 4 virtual CPUs. It really only needs 2 or maybe even 1. So that's the goal, is to right size your virtual machines so that they have the number of virtual CPUs that they need and no more. You're never going to improve the performance of a VM by building it out with additional unnecessary processors. Now, that's the way that things used to work, strict co-scheduling. As time has gone on and into versions of vSphere 5 or later, there's now something called relaxed co-scheduling that helps improve this situation a little bit. So here again, we have a virtual machine with 4 virtual CPUs and a virtual machine with 2 virtual CPUs. And in our last diagram, remember, these virtual machines couldn't execute at the same time. They were taking turns. Well, with relaxed co-scheduling, the virtual machine with 4 virtual CPUs can continue to make progress even when it can only access 2 virtual CPUs. And even when it can only access 2 processor cores, 2 of the virtual CPUs can continue to make progress. So what we end up with is we don't have those wasted time slots that we saw in the previous diagram. So relaxed co-scheduling can eliminate some of the CPU capacity waste that we had with strict co-scheduling. But it's not a magic bullet. We still need to right size our virtual machines. It's still critical that you properly size your VMs, because with relaxed co-scheduling, there are other issues that can arise, one of which is called CPU skew. So let's focus in on that virtual machine with 4 virtual CPUs. Here we see the 4 virtual CPUs of that VM, vCPU 1 through 4. And under normal circumstances, all 4 of those virtual CPUs are going to make progress at the identical rate. That's what our guest operating system wants to see. That's what Windows or Linux wants to see. Remember, our guest OS doesn't know that it's a virtual machine, so it expects these 4 processors to perform similarly. If 2 virtual CPUs are making progress and the other 2 are not, eventually those virtual CPUs are going to get further and further ahead of the other 2 virtual CPUs. And when this hits a certain threshold, that virtual machine's vCPUs are considered to be skewed. Once we get to a point where the acceptable difference in performance of those virtual CPUs is exceeded, the vSphere CPU scheduler will actually start slowing down those processors that are moving faster using something called co-stop. So if you see co-stop occurring on your ESXi host, this is the reason why. You have some vCPUs that are making progress faster than others, and so for the sake of the guest operating system, we will then slow down those faster vCPUs so that all appears to be similar within the guest OS.